Alright guys, let's do this, man. I've got all the on-camera heebie-jeebies out. I'm in my ridiculously overpacked room slash studio slash entertainment center slash all that. I don't even know my thing rotates. Okay, vlog number 1, overall video number 258. Look at the camera here. Okay, all right. Let's do this. Yeah, so you know me usually as the guy who's making skits, who's campaigning for the Mac PGOT. All of this is unnecessary information, but I span. Okay, so starting this new thing where I do something productive every day at 9 p.m. And today I spin my randomizer wheel on my app, and today is vlog. So vlog number 1, video 257, 258, I think. But this is something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. And I guess now, better than any time to do it. It's kind of coming out of left field, but to me, I guess it makes sense. This morning, a good friend of mine sent me an old video of him at a summer camp called Kids Across America, KAA for short. It's under the Kanakuk umbrella. And it brought back a lot of memories, great memories. But also just some things I found problematic in regards to how things were handled at camp. And I could talk about the problematic nature of what seems to be the separation between campers of color and non-campers of non-campers of color. But that's a whole different video. That's not the video I'm talking about today. And if that's something you want to hear about, my take on that problematic nature, by all means, let me know in the comments, because I kind of have my 2 cents to talk about it. But today, we're talking about Christian rappers. Again, it seems kind of left field, but something I've had my mind on a whole lot. So, Christian rappers. Lecrae, Andy Mineo, Trip Lee, Thistle Swoop, Alex Faith, Propaganda, Cannon, Dre Murray, Christian Grey, who's more of a R&B singer, but he can rap. Dude can rap. This is by not at all a means of calling you out, but more so something, a commentary of caring, if you will. There's been something I've noticed in fields. Back in college, a little bit of high school, I was big into youth ministry, and I'm more so straight into an overall youth development type niche, if you will. But I was big into youth ministry in college and high school, and I noticed a lot of something when it came to addressing whether they be campers, students, youth of color. And before I get started, I know there's going to be like a lot of trolls and a lot of people who disagree with what I'm saying. That's fine. I totally welcome that. You do you. You have the freedom to disagree. This is just my commentary. So you can come for my neck, go for the jugular all you want. This is just my personal commentary. Probably not even affiliated, or probably these thoughts are my own and they're not affiliated with anyone, or they're not shared by anyone that I'm affiliated with. So again, these thoughts are all my own, and that is not indicative of whether or not they are shared with anyone or any entity that I'm affiliated with. So with that out of the way, Christian rappers, I urge you to stop performing in spaces where they don't consider your music, your performance as worship. I have seen many churches, camps, performances, festivals where they treat Christian rap as a novelty, not as a form of worship, which I think is inherently problematic. I've verbatim, or rather, I've heard out of the mouths of like the MC or the host of the evening after a Christian rapper has performed, or several Christian rappers have performed. They'll say something like all right now, let's give it up for whoever. Now we're gonna slow things down, take things a little more serious, and head into worship. And it's those last couple of phrases that kind of always caught me off guard. Or not really caught me off guard, but just I found problematic. And I can recall these things being said. So yeah, I can, and it's those last couple of phrases that I found to be like super problematic and super offensive and kind of ridiculous. And and counterintuitive to the message of worship and why worship is important. And I've heard hosts and MCs or whatever presenters. I've heard them say this multiple times. I've heard it said at A&M when I was in college at A&M. I think it was either KYX or BYX. They had a party at Mitchell Woods Pavilion. No, that's the one of the Woodlands. Well, there's this the Wolf Creek Pavilion. Wolf Creek Pavilion. They had one there, and it was like a 2-day event. So the first day was Christian rappers. I think they called it something corny like the Turn Up Day or something like that, right? And then the second day was Worship Day or something like that. And essentially they split up the days, which again is also somewhat problematic. But they switched up the days between one day being all Christian rappers and one day being mainly like worship bands, if you will. You know the types, the ones that, you know, have a big band and they'll like whisper or like do that like raspy voice thing into the mic and sing the same songs that have been on, I guess, Christian radio for years. I don't know. I don't really follow that. Anyways, and I just always thought it was really problematic. I've heard it at the BYX or KYX things. I've heard it at Impact, which is another Texas A&M Christian function, and I've heard it at Kids Across America. And needless to say, it was just problematic to say, and this is literally after a Christian rapper would leave the stage. They would say something like, we're going to take this time to get a little more serious, time to settle down, quiet down, we're going to head into a worship time. And to me, there shouldn't be, and to me, worship is worship. And I'm not going to get into the semantics of whether or not worship should be strictly musical or if it can be any sort of glorification of talents. That's not what this video particularly is about. But in this case, in this scenario, I firmly believe that if you are doing some art form, especially when it's in music, whether it's lyrics or instruments or words or a big band or, in this case, a solo rapper or a group of rappers, that is worship. And to me, it's problematic that when, let's face it, when there's a certain music genre that may cater or that is more relatable, if you will, whether it be lyrics or music type or what have you, to a certain demographic, that all of a sudden it's not worship, or because it's not traditional. It's not, I'm gonna whisper into a microphone with my acoustic guitar, or it's not folksy music, or it's hip-hop sounding, that it's not worship. I think it's super ridiculous and super problematic. But I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen everywhere, and I think that it needs to stop. Worship is worship. And again, Christian rappers, if you are, and again, I'm not a contract specialist. I'm not, I know nothing about how churches do performance contracts or how Christian organizations do performance contracts. But I would urge all Christian rappers, whether they are established and are constantly getting booked, or if they're new and up and coming, that if you are in a place where, and again, you may not know beforehand, but if you have an inkling, but they don't accept your art form as worship, I would urge you to not perform in those spaces. Because your impact is more than a novelty. Your impact is more than a fun, we're going to have fun, we're going to turn up, we're going to, that kind of thing. Your reach is larger than that. Your impact is larger than that. Your representation is larger than that. To say, when I go to these places like, and I don't want to keep messing with the name of the fraternity, so I'll just say Christian fraternities. When I see these, and fairly, if we're going to be fair, predominantly non-people of color Christian fraternities, and these predominantly non-people of color churches, or these predominantly non-people of color camps, you go in, and when the host of the event or the preacher or the pastor says something like, oh, now we're going to head into worship, right after the Christian rapper just did his thing, did his set, that completely dismisses and illegitimizes, his or her story, his or her impact, his or her reach, his or her demographic, their audience, because this is for any artist, but in the concept of Christian rap, any artist is bringing their story, and in this case, their testimony, and their words, and their life, their passion, everything that becomes in being an artist and being a Christian artist at the same time. All of that goes into spilling all that for an audience that may or may not even know you. Chances are they don't know you personally. And if you're a Christian rapper playing in a non people of color type environment, chances are they probably don't know your music at all. Or they've only heard maybe your hit single or something. And you're spilling that to them, and then to spill your testimony, whether or not it's your biggest hit, spill your testimony and then have the host say, we're going to go into worship. We're going to go into something more serious. We're going to slow things down. You know, it's problematic. And then I wonder if I hear you say that as a preacher, as a host, as a camp, I wonder what was your reasoning to bring them. So at KAA, most likely you brought them, or I should say Kanakuk, because that's the umbrella of KAA. You most likely brought the Christian rapper to appeal to the KAA campers, which are predominantly campers of color. You probably brought them over and said, hey, they're probably not listening, these kids, these campers, are probably not listening to traditional Christian worship. You know, Hillsong, Crowder, I don't know, Chris Tomlin, you know who I'm talking about. Traditional Christian rap. They probably only heard. They're probably assuming that if they were to listen to Christian music, it's probably gonna be Christian rap. And I'm not gonna go into the whole whether or not these kids are listening to Christian rap or listening to secular rap. The point is, because I question your motives as to why you brought the Christian rapper here. If you assume, or if you infer, or if you believe, wholeheartedly believe that their music is not worship, did you bring this Christian rapper to appear more diverse? Did you do it to pander to the campers? Did you do it to have a more upbeat set and then a more downward set? And if it's the latter, then that's fine. But don't marginalize the Christian rapper's performance and say it's not worship. And let me disclaimer and say I've never actively heard a preacher, host, whatever say that's not worship. But when you say, like right when after the Christian rapper leaves, you say, we're gonna slow things down and now we're gonna get into the worship portion of our event. Semantics or whatever, but that statement implies that you don't believe that what this performer just did, this Christian performer just did, is valid as worship. So again, contention, Christian rappers do not perform in places where your art form is not considered worship. I can speak for myself and say that I know that I've never felt or seen more representation or felt closer to the Lord or have had more spiritual experiences or more worshipful experiences than when I have listened to Christian rap or seen a live Christian rapper and they have their kind of message portion of the concert, or whenever I, you know, I'm listening to a Christian rap song and I hear the lyrics and I feel a connection to the lyrics because of some similarity between myself and the Christian rapper's life story, and then I see them live and they put on the same song, and then you have a spiritual movement and then an emotional movement. Me personally, I've gotten way more. I could probably count or do a percentage. I can say that I've had way more connections or spiritual moments or emotional moments coming from Christian rap than I ever have from traditional worship. And so that got me to thinking, if I feel that way, then surely millions of other men and women, children of color felt the same way when they go see their favorite Christian rapper or when they listen to their favorite Christian rapper's music. Then they get an opportunity to go see the Christian rapper. And we're not going to talk about Christian rap and touring and them touring secular fields and everything. We all know mainly Christian rappers are usually going to play in religious venues. We know that. So let's say a young kid of color feels the same way I do, shares similar thoughts and feelings, gets to finally see their favorite Christian rapper, goes to a mega church or a camp or some sort of event. They have, you know, the spirit moves due to the music. It's emotional, it's exciting for the kid, and then the host gets up there. So let's say the same kid has a wonderful experience. Spirit moves, it's high emotion. The spirit moves, it's high emotion. Kid sees himself on stage due to the representation, due to the lyrics, similarity, testimony, all that. And then the host comes up and says, oh, we're going to slow down. We're going to take things more serious. We're going to go into our worship time. Imagine how invalidated that kid feels after he was having the best time. And I'm using this analogy because I felt that, especially as a kid. I felt that as a kid when you're not really learned in aspects of theology or church culture or whatever, and you kind of just kind of take what you're taught either through example or through verbal teaching. So now what's going on in this kid's head is my emotions, the way the spirit moved, this person's testimony, who's my favorite and who I recognize and see representation. Now that's not worship. It's what the kid's being told. That's not worship. And if it's not worship, then is it valid? Is it valid to the Lord? Is it valid to the church, to the congregation? Is it valid to my spiritual leader, whether it be my pastor, mentor, whatever? Imagine a kid going through that in their head. And imagine that kid being thousands, if not millions of fans, who their primary genre of music to connect to the Lord may be Christian rap. It may not be gospel music. It may not be Christian contemporary, or whatever you want to call it, whatever genre term. It may be holy hip hop, Christian rap, whatever. Imagine that go through a young black or brown child's head, that, oh, my favorite form of music to connect to the Lord or to see representation is now not worship. Let me just say, as you think on that, invisible audience, and again, going back to my personal experience, I know I have seen tons of times the Spirit move in a congregation due to Christian rap or due to a Christian performance. Now, going back to KA, I remember many a times where we would have in the lunchroom have some of the best moments of fellowship and the Spirit moving, and the Spirit moving, and high energy, just representation and worship from Christian rap. Being around so many young men campers of color, and seeing them react in a positive way to Christian rap, which, let's be honest, they're probably not listening to Christian rap when they go back home. I knew, even as a counselor, a coach is what they call it, aka, I know on my off days, I really wasn't listening to Christian rap. I was listening to the new hot secular rap song that came out on my days off, but whatever. I digress. But to see that is amazing. But imagine if those kids had that moment with their coaches and camp counselors of fellowship, high energy, the Spirit moving, and then they're told by another spiritual leader that's not worship. At the end of the day, let me bring back my contention. Christian rappers do not perform in spaces where they consider your art form not worship. You don't need a mega church to validate you. You don't need a large event to validate you and your lyrics and your testimony. You don't need a large camp. And that's not to say these events are inherently bad or they have intents of malice or what have you. But you don't need these large conferences to validate you. And that's a whole nother vlog as to whether or not people feel like they need, let's be honest, a primarily large non-people of color audience in order to be validated. The idea of being white famous is not absent of the Christian realm. The idea of being white famous is not absent of the Christian realm. I would just say to all the Christian rappers out there that no, you don't need a megachurch to validate you. You can go into these grassroots, homegrown, and let's be honest, you may not get the big check like you would in a megachurch, but you can bring your testimony and lyrics and your music to the grassroots churches full of boys, girls, men and women that look like you, and they're going to appreciate your work and consider it worship. You can do that. You don't have to go straight from the studio, get hot, and then go to the mega church or go to the mega camp. Don't forget how important your representation is in the church field. Because music is a form of preference. Not everybody prefers gospel. Not everybody prefers contemporary Christian, or whatever other Christian genres are out there. Some people prefer Christian rap, especially if you're a young man and woman, black, of color, brown, whatever, you know? So I would implore every Christian rapper to seriously think about accepting money or validation or whatever. Think about who it's from and who you're performing for, because a lot of these kids, and I know adults listen to this too, but a lot of these kids see you as representation. And they may not even know what representation is yet. They just know they see you in them, or they see your story, your testimony. Because let's not forget, a lot of you Christian rappers' lyrics, it's really your testimony put in musical form. So don't forget about these kids. Don't forget how important you are to them. They see your worship as valid. They see your music as valid, and they see it as worship. So don't forget those kids and how important you are to them. So yeah, just think about that, Christian rappers. Something that's been on my mind for a while. Don't know why. It's been on my mind for a while. Way back, because I haven't been to KAA in a minute. If you want to know why I left KAA, tell me you want to know why in the comments. It's not a bad story. It's not like a scandal. It's just an interesting story. If you want to hear about any of my other youth development, youth ministry exploits, let me know. Also, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. First vlog. Most of you know I don't normally talk into a camera, but this was therapeutic. I will say that. Yeah, so check out my website, ericwashington.net, and yeah, have a good night. Do your thing. Have a good night, day, morning, whatever you're watching this on. And see you next time on the Eric Washington vlog. Bye.